Disclaimer: this podcast episode is for awareness and educational purposes only, with mentions of body image and eating disorders. If you have been affected by any of the above, please reach out for support where needed. Check the description below for resources. Hello, and welcome to the final episode of the Girl Log Off podcast. I am your host Katie, and in this episode I will be talking about how body image is presented across social media, and in that I will be looking into topics and trends within this. Things like skinny talk, body positivity, and the rise of Ozempic or Mounjaro. Like I said in the intro episode, this is something I resonate with rather closely, having experienced the effects social media has on body image. I won't go into too much detail, otherwise we'd be here all day, but you see, a few years ago I experienced an eating disorder, and something I will never forget was the fact that I was sat on TikTok watching people post about them recovering from their own eating disorders, and all I remember was being sat there being like, oh well, I mustn't have an eating disorder because I'm not doing everything that these people are doing. When in fact I was definitely in the same boat as them, and if not worse. And I think that there are probably several different types of every kind of eating disorder and different degrees of how bad they are. Whether it's anorexia or bulimia and all the others, they all affect people in different ways, the same way that everyone in the world's body is different. No one's body is the same. You could be the same exact weight and height and still look different to the person that you're comparing yourself to. Anyways, there are both positive and negative trends that circulate every few years that will have an effect on body image and the way your body is supposed to look. First, let's get into the negatives. First of all, there are unrealistic body ideals that are always going to circulate over the years. Trends associated with this tend to be the ones that promote specific and most of the time unattainable body types, such as the thigh gap or the slim thick look, which most of the time can lead to unhealthy behaviours to achieve them. The next one is one I definitely fell victim for, and that is body checking. This is where you are constantly scrutinising the look of your own body and compare it to others, which inevitably becomes a harmful cycle, reinforced by social media algorithms that favour certain types of content. I remember every time I walked past a mirror or anything that was reflective, I would check how my body looked. I think my main concern was my stomach. For some strange reason, I hate when my stomach looked bloated, which is a natural thing, by the way. That feeling has never left me. I've just learned to live with it. But I remember if it was ever the tiniest bit bloated off a meal that I just ate or anything, my mood would instantly change for the rest of the day, which is not a healthy habit or a healthy way of living at all. And also, about the algorithm, I've noticed that TikTok or Instagram never favours the positive content on body image. It is always the negative. And simultaneously, it's always the negative content that will get more views, as the positive trends will always get shadow banned through the algorithm. Have no idea why it does this, but that's just the way that TikTok has shaped that algorithm, which is really backwards in a society when we should be promoting positive content. Another one is extreme diet trends, which tends to be videos titled What I Eat in a Day. Even with disclaimers, this can still promote restrictive habits and contribute to eating disorders. I think it is such a strange concept that people will post what they eat in a day, with timestamps. I personally think it gets rid of the fact that everyone is different and everyone needs different intakes, whether it's calories or the types of food you can eat in a day. It also tends to again bring on comparison culture, because someone could be sat there watching someone post and eating the day and they could be eating either way less than they do or way more than they do and still have a similar body type or slightly different in a way, which will start people maybe trying to restrict what they normally eat because they're seeing other people eat more or less than what they are, which again leads to unhealthy habits. Again, similar to body checking, there is social comparison, which is where platforms encourage comparison, which can lead to feelings of inadequacy, body dissatisfaction, and even mental health disorders, like eating disorders. The algorithm plays a big role in this, again, by showing people the negative concepts rather than the positive things. And finally, one of the biggest of the lot, the rise of Ozempic or Mounjaro fueled trends, where there's been recently a rise in weight loss drugs which have fueled trends like the ballet body, which in the ballet body trend, it emphasises a very thin and toned look, which increases pressure to conform to unrealistic thinness ideals. This is something that even now I can't get my head round. Now, don't get me wrong, I can understand if someone had to use it for their own health that has been recommended by a doctor or any health professional. However, if someone was using it who definitely doesn't need it and is being given it when they don't meet the requirements of being able to use it, that is the part that I just can't get my head round, because why are you using something that you definitely don't need? I have also recently seen adverts on my TikTok for tablets called Berberine on my For You page that are easily accessible via the TikTok shop. They are basically tablets that you can buy for as cheap as £18 and they are supposed to suppress your appetite, which I find crazy that you can easily purchase them through TikTok shop. So I can't even imagine how many young people have access to them. The adverts that I've seen for this is actually kind of crazy. So it'll be someone about to sit and eat a meal, but then they'll pause and be like, oh wait, the Berberine's just kicked in, so I'm no longer hungry. Regardless whether someone is going to buy the tablets, it is emphasising the fact that it's apparently so wrong to eat a cheap meal every so often or just eat takeout food and food that is actually healthy for you in general. Because I'm sure I've seen ones of salads as well, and I'm just like, this is not how you should advertise weight loss products. They shouldn't even be advertised at all. Now, enough about the negative stuff, let's get on to some of the positive aspects of body image. I think body positivity is probably one of the most positive things that has came out of social media in terms of body image. This movement aims to challenge unrealistic body standards by promoting the acceptance and celebrations of diverse shapes and sizes. This is a movement that gets rid of unrealistic body standards and ideals that social media has built. And I think that this movement helps us understand that all bodies look different no matter what. And I also think that it is really empowering, especially for women. Even though it does happen, it is very rare that we see men talking and dealing with their body the same way that women do. The next one, I think, has both positive and negative repercussions, and it is motivation and support through progress pictures, milestones, and struggles, which provides motivation and a sense of community for others on their own health journey, which is definitely positive for the person posting those progress pictures, as they will be receiving all the positive comments and it will definitely boost their confidence and motivation to keep going. However, it can also be influencing comparison culture, in the sense that someone could see them who has been putting in the same amount of effort as the person who's posted those progress photos for the same amount of time, and maybe their progress looks a lot different, which again does not help the understanding that everyone's bodies work in a different way, and maybe they have a different metabolism, or maybe they have a different body type. I think fitness trends are another positive as long as people know their own limits when partaking in those trends. Trends that are focused on health and functionality, like calisthenics and other forms of bodyweight training, which have seen a resurgence in popularity at the minute. Which is good because fitness is both good for your body and it can also be very good for your mind too. I know I find fitness as a way to switch off from all the thoughts I have in my mind. Although I do go to the gym, but I much prefer a big long walk, whether it's at the coast or in the countryside, or a hike even. Following on from this quite nicely is mindful movements, which are trends that emphasise the mental and spiritual beliefs of exercise, not just the physical outcomes, which again echoes what I said before. Exercise can clear your mind and overall make you feel a lot better about yourself. But what are the recent developments? In other words, what is in at the moment for body image? First off, we have the return of the ultra thin ideal, which surged back in the early 2000s. Now, I understand that the fashion trends are very much back from then, but let's not bring back visible hips and collarbones purposefully. If your body looks like that naturally, then great, but trying to lose weight to achieve this look can be incredibly dangerous. Now, we talked before about all the positives of body positivity. This is a movement that should have primarily stayed on social media, so it has a community sort of vibe. However, brands are now using this movement for commercialization, which you could say is diluting its original message by using it for profit. I can see why brands may be using it. It's like brands like Fenty, and then there's like a few fashion brands too. But using the body positivity movement for money is a bit I feel like it does defeat the purpose of the message, like, a lot, because it is supposed to be like a community space on social media where you can search it in the search engine and it'll just be positive videos after positive videos. I guess brands using body positivity for commercialization is kind of creating more standards that people may want to meet, rather than accepting the body the way that it is. And lastly, this is probably the biggest of the lot, the rise of AI. So, years ago, and it is still very much relevant now, but I guess since AIs came about, it became a lot less popular. But we still do have filtered and edited faces and bodies within the media. People use the editing apps to simply cinch in the waist, make their bum look a little bit bigger. Now people can use AI to give them, again, similar to filtered images and edited pictures and videos, people can use AI to create a whole new body, which I can imagine it won't leave many of your natural features behind. So basically, you are literally creating a body that definitely isn't yours. And if you use it to create your ideal body type, then you're definitely creating unrealistic expectations for yourself, in the sense that AI will create maybe the goal weight you want to be at, but you could get to that goal weight and not look like what AI made, which is unrealistic because now you have expectations of how you want to look and you're not actually going to look like that. Now, let's get on to the interviews. First up, Lauren Steckles Young, a University of Sunderland lecturer.
So I have recently finished my PhD that looked at the influence of social media on young people's relationships with their body, with health and fitness, the role that diet culture plays in that. The research came from a lived experience perspective. So I have struggled and I talk about this in my work, I've struggled in previous years with an eating disorder off the back of various different variables, but very much mass media and social media and the representation of women's bodies hugely influenced my relationship with food, and it influenced the way that I foresaw exercise. I grew up in a family where fad diets were everything. So very much came from a perspective of these are the things I've experienced. I know a lot of people who have also experienced the same things, so let's explore it further. So my background came from lived experience, but also working as a mental health professional in various different settings. In education, I worked in the prison service and in psychiatric hospitals as well. And what I found working, it didn't matter who I was working with. I predominantly actually worked with young men, which you don't always hear of men's perspectives of body image. But despite the various different areas I worked within, I repeatedly would be spoken to about people's either lack of understanding of the role that social media can play in the way that we communicate, the spreading of misinformation, and also the representations that it creates around people's bodies, but also people's concerns of what that would mean for them. So as a young person, like, what does my social media profile do for me? Do I need to be concerned about what I post online? Do I believe what I read online? Why can't I be like these people online? Or this sort of growing trend for young people of wanting to be an influencer, because it's made to seem so easy to gain traction and gain a following. So where my work sort of intersects with social media, mass media and body image, I suppose, is very much just looking at the impact of it. I wasn't bothered about looking at like the markets that underpin it and the algorithms. I'm not tech savvy. It's a huge part of it. I understand as much as I need to around algorithms and the impact of trends and that sort of thing. And what I wanted to hear was people's actual experiences of it, rather than thinking about what the social media platforms directly do, and thinking about actually the impact that that has on people, whether it's harmful, whether it's positive. So rather than just focusing on the negative experiences that someone like I have had, looking at people's positive experiences of how social media can help them connect with people, how it can actually give them great advice when it comes to healthy living, when it comes to money management, lifestyle opportunities. So looking at both the pros and cons.
Yeah, I think that is a bit similar to why I wanted to do an episode on this, because I remember during the time I had an eating disorder, I would just doom scroll through content knowing that I shouldn't be.
Yeah, and that's what I found interesting with the research I did, because I was always the same, and I was trying to make sure that my interviews, because I did interviews and I did a digital ethnography. So I kind of delved into Reddit and I delved into Tattle Life, looking at the way that people would communicate with one another and the way they would troll each other, and that was just totally acceptable. Or also people would genuinely ask for it as a form of, I think the trend was termed mean sport, where it was kind of mean, nasty narratives to inspire someone to lose weight. And that started on the likes of Tumblr and MySpace a long time ago, but has bled into Reddit and Tattle Life. But I wanted to make sure with my interviews that I wasn't just placing my experiences on people and presuming that other people had that. But I think it's really important that, especially from kind of like the social theory perspective, for so many years we were told not to research things that we were potentially too emotionally attached to. But actually, I think if we have lived experience in something, there's power in being able to position ourselves as insiders within the work while still kind of analysing it from a distance and making sure that you are still reducing bias, you are trying to remain as kind of objective as possible and reduce that idea that if you're too emotionally attached to something, you can't research it.
Why do you think body image is such an important topic to examine in today's digital world?
I think it's more prevalent than ever because of the role that the likes of AI has. So in my opinion, obviously, filtering images has always been an issue, and that has always been an issue that has fed into predominantly women's experiences of body image, but also with men. If we think of the imagery that mass media has set out for many years around the ideal woman and the ideal man, the different trends that come through women's diet culture around, kind of like heroin chic and being, thinking of Kate Moss, Victoria's Secret's models, like supermodels who were very, very thin. And then moving into the trend of like the hourglass figure that led into women engaging in cosmetic surgery, getting Brazilian bum lifts, getting, breast enhancements, the rise in filler and the lack of regulation around beauty standards, and beauty filler and kind of facial modification. But I think that now that we have, where previously with mass media and even with social media, we knew that things were photoshopped. It was a bit more obvious when things had been photoshopped, and it was pointed out quite a lot more when we had physical magazines or newspapers that would Photoshop images. And a lot of the time there was a disclosure to say that, as a magazine, we do use Photoshop for our cover photos. Now it's because technology is enhancing, it's becoming more and more difficult to navigate what is real and what isn't. And for me, what my research found, and from my opinion as well, if we don't have any regulations around, say, influencers or celebrities or people who use social media as a platform of kind of communication to a large following, if there's no regulations that require them to say that something is filtered, then it's very difficult for particularly young people, but all of us, to navigate if that's a realistic standard to hold ourselves to, or if it's filtered, whether that's down to changing the shape of someone's body or even, whitening their teeth and changing like the tone and smoothness of their skin. The complex nature of technology now means that we are creating standards for ourselves and for kind of communities within social media around body image that isn't realistic. But we don't know it's not realistic because it's really difficult to now tell what's real and what's not. So I actually think that body image is something we need to be exploring with all generations, but particularly with young people, now more than ever, for them to understand what is realistic and what isn't. That gullible understanding of what is real and what isn't, because people do just take everything they see online as face value. And that's problematic when we are having so many conversations around the spreading of misinformation or the creation of deep fakes and different ways that we use AI now. But when it comes to body image or diet culture or beauty, or kind of more broadly, people are still just presuming that what's in front of them is real, and that's what I need to work towards, rather than considering actually, is that what the person really looks like?
Yeah, that, and everyone's body's different. Some people can't lose weight in certain areas or gain weight in certain areas, so it's just not going to be a realistic expectation for everyone.
100%. And like, I think it is it's not even just thinking about what's realistic and what's not. It's exactly what you said there, teaching people how different bodies look. Because you would never stand two people alongside each other or a row of people alongside each other and them look the exact same, even if they weigh the same amount or they're in the same dress size. Everyone's body looks very different. Everyone's facial features look very different. And if we didn't, it would be quite a boring world if we all looked the same.
What does like current research suggest about the relationship between social media use and body image, like especially among like young women and women in general?
Prolonged social media consumption leads to low self-esteem, leads to low body satisfaction or high levels of body dissatisfaction, and that there is a cause and effect between the consumption of diet culture related social media and low self-esteem that can lead into disordered eating. And if you do look at the qualitative understandings of trying to understand how people have got there, there is a strong narrative to suggest that it's not just prolonged, like longer time spent on social media, it's actually what we consume and the way that the social media platforms are set up. So even if you don't intend to search for content like what I eat in a day, snatching a waist or kind of growing glutes, like certain trends that come with diet culture and body image, or particularly women's trends, they still come up on For You pages and suggested content based on the age category you sit within and the fact that you, in your personal identifiable information, have inputted into Instagram or TikTok or even Facebook to a degree, but mostly Instagram and TikTok, have inputted that you're a woman between the ages of 18 and 30. And more than likely, you're going to get that content filtered through your For You and suggested algorithm, which means that even if you aren't searching for it, it's there. So actually what the research tells us as well is that algorithms are built to intentionally bring individuals of certain ages, genders, and usually geographical location, but that's a bit less discussed in research. But depending on your age and your gender will depend on the type of content relating to body image that is filtered to you.
How do cultural expectations and social norms influence how people respond to images on social media?
It depends on the type of content they're consuming when it comes to how kind of the likes of cultural norms or, like you say, social normativity would feed into the way that people respond. I think that if there's a particular incident that's going on in society or something that's quite heavy through the media as a message or a concern, that will craft people's responses on social media to imagery, to news sharing, to one another. The influence of trolling depends on particular issues. But what I do think when it comes to kind of like cultural norms is that for the most part, given that we live in, albeit there's obviously huge concerns in society at the moment, around instances of hate crimes towards particular cultures and racial groups, and that's obviously huge at the moment. But overall, cultural norms that feed into social media tend to be visible in the cultures we build on social media rather than it being what we see on in the streets. So for me, I think that the way that social media is built and the way that we communicate with one another on social media creates new cultural norms, whereby there's an acceptability to troll someone, for example. There's an acceptability to dehumanize people on social media, whereby, you know, just because there's a screen in front of you, you're more likely to, say, receive negative comments on an image you've posted in a bikini, for example. If someone is, you know, really proud of, say, a weight loss or weight gain journey that they've been on and are feeling body positive or just feeling body neutral, and they don't necessarily, you know, have any level of emotion away towards the way their body looks, they've chosen to post an image, you are far more likely to receive negative comments on an online post than if you're walking around a pool in a bikini on holiday.
I think people find it so easy to say like horrible stuff behind the screen because they're behind the screen.
Yeah. And it's one of those where it's a case of, okay, I can send it and I can detach myself Whereas if you say it to someone's face in the moment, you will have the instant consequence
reaction.
Yeah, and that there's a level of kind of calmness, I think, for a lot of people who do troll or say nasty things online, or say things that they just wouldn't say in person. There's a level of calmness because they almost feel protected by having the screen in front of them.
Is there any particular trends that have like stayed quite popular over the years that have had like a really like big impact on how on women and how like body image is perceived?
I think the main sort of trends that I've seen that have stuck around have been, and some people would say these are helpful trends, to be honest. Some people would say that they're not, so it depends on how you sort of experience them. But I would argue that kind of discussions around calorie counting particularly is a trend that has stayed for a long time, where it's sort of, you see a lot of people discrediting the likes of Weight Watchers, Slimming World, the previous Atkins diet, keto, like different named diets, where it's a case of, actually, we will teach you how to calorie count instead. That can be great. However, what that has then led to is, because of the continuation of trying to discuss kind of calorie counting and the impact of calories in versus calories out, and I think there's been an oversimplification of that, where that we still aren't teaching in PHSD or online. We're not teaching people around actual nutrition. We're just saying, well, we're still labeling food as good food, bad food. So we're still demonizing certain food groups, both online and in education spaces. But within that, kind of more broadly, that's seen then the introduction in the UK of calorie labeling in any vendor or restaurant or cafe, kind of any food or drinks provider that can serve more than 250 people either at a time or at a day, in one day. So that's majority of food vendors. We see it across the university. You can't even go and get a coffee without it telling you the calorie difference between your Americano and your cappuccino, which I think, I understand the importance, and I'm a huge advocate for people understanding what they are putting in their body. I'm a huge advocate for that, whether it's because of my experience of having an eating disorder and avoiding so many foods for so many years, when actually if I'd seen the calories on a menu, I would have realised that I could have had that bowl of pasta rather than having a really sad little salad, because there really wasn't too much difference, or understanding the amount that my body actually could consume rather than going into starvation mode. That would have been great. However, I think we've gone the other end of, if we can't even get a coffee without understanding what's in it. For people who do have a disordered relationship with food, with their body, or actively have an eating disorder, whether it's a history of or active, that can be hugely problematic for someone, because that can be the difference between going to get that cappuccino that you really fancy on a study break to going and getting a bottle of water instead. And it can be hugely problematic. So I think that trend has, if it's used in the right way, it can be really quite supportive. It has obviously worked to debunking a lot of fad diets. It has, when used in the right way, but I'm a firm believer that people in the online space or influencers who share calorie diets, who share personal training or communities that they build and apps that they have, I'm a firm believer that they should have to have the qualifications to do that. They shouldn't be able to advise people without qualifications. And I think sadly there's a lack of regulation, where anyone who comes out of Love Island or any of the reality TV show can put their name on something that they're not qualified to do. So I think there's problematic elements to it, although the education side of things is a great starting point to getting rid of fad diets. A trend that I have also seen stick around, that again, I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but I'm a firm believer in not demonizing certain types of exercise as well, which I think has happened, is the growing understanding of weightlifting in women's training. I think that's fantastic to, again, debunk those myths that if you lift weights, you're going to look manly, and what masculinity looks like in weightlifting, and the huge benefits of resistance training. I'm a huge advocate for. But again, the flip side of that trend is the demonization of cardio, and that separation still of kind of weightlifters and cardio bunnies. I don't think that's helpful. Again, I think it comes back to an education stance of moving your body. What can these different forms of exercise do for your body? Teaching people that you can't spot reduce fat. It's about being healthy and looking more holistically at your health. So the trends that stick out for me, I suppose, are ones that both have pros and cons. But I think the trends that we're seeing now are staying for longer, and hopefully are coming from a more educated stance, particularly women, understanding weight fluctuations. If we think of exercise and eating around our cycle, some women don't have huge fluctuations, but some women carry a lot of water at certain parts of their cycle, where actually they can have a weight fluctuation on the scales of kind of 10 pounds, as significant as that. And if that was the one day, that month or that week that they stepped on the scales, and you were just so focused on, okay, I need to reduce my calories because I'm putting on weight, you haven't actually put on weight, you're just carrying additional water. And that could be, like I say, from your cycle, it could be from extra salt the day before. There's so many different ways that our bodies change that we don't teach people. But I also don't think that side of things would be too complex to teach young people in schools. I think it can be actually taught in a really quite straightforward way without always focusing on either the numbers or demonizing certain food groups.
Role does comparison play, and why are people so vulnerable to it?
For me, comparison is the thing that sits at kind of the centre, like the central focus of diet culture, of influence, particularly diet culture, because obviously diet culture predates social media, but on social media it has a huge place. And I think that it comes through a mass media narrative of what is healthy and what isn't. And what my research found is kind of we've blurred the lines between health and beauty. And actually, this idealistic, really slim, muscular, whatever the trend is at the time, body doesn't make someone healthy. But sadly, I think because we've blurred, even in kind of healthcare, we've blurred the difference between how we should look and how we shouldn't look. That it's caused this kind of process of hyper comparison, where all we do is compare to one another. And there's a breadth of kind of feminist literature that looks at this concept of internalized misogyny. And my work kind of looked at that ever so slightly, where I spoke to young women and they would say, the way that social media is set up to always have us looking at people's images and thinking whether it's down to their body or whether it's down to the lifestyle that they lead, and always being on holiday or seeming to always have new outfits that other people can't afford. There's so many broader notions of what we should be aspiring to achieve. And I think social media's played a huge part in that, because previously, before going on social media and having people's lives in front of us 24/7, at all times of the day, for however long we wanted to be there, we couldn't consume that comparison past TV programs we watched, past our local communities, or maybe conversations we had with friends and family about other people that they know. And that message of what other people had and what we didn't have, therefore, wasn't passed as quickly. And I think now that social media is built on trends and algorithms and the sharing of every detail of our lives, comparison is now more prevalent than ever. And it's something that also feeds into bringing us back to social media. Also, you've got the huge rise in Mounjaro, or forms of Mounjaro, and people thinking, actually, I've seen you lose weight at a rapid pace, and you either said you've used Mounjaro or you haven't. Maybe I should give it a go. And looking at the way that advertisements are built around that as well. So rather than kind of, I would say, openly or overtly comparing ourselves, I think it's almost embedded in conversations without us realising we're doing it.
Can seeing diverse bodies, influencers, create a meaningful change, or does the underlying system still reinforce the narrow beauty standards?
Sadly, think that the structure of social media and the systems continue to reinforce issues around body image. However, I do think that seeing a diverse range of bodies and backgrounds and wealths and beauty and how beauty looks in different ways, I think there is a lot of power in that, and that came through my research, where if there was women who identified as being fat, as being disabled, as just generally knowing that they looked or feeling that they look different to the majority of women online, they would intentionally find other influencers or profiles that they felt looked like them or felt more achievable and realistic with the terms they would use, whether it was something they were working towards or whether it was just their life in general. And they found that there was a direct relationship or cause and effect between consuming content that felt more real to them and a person that felt more relatable than someone who kind of upheld high standards that were very different to them. So I do think drawing on and being able to consume a diverse range of beauty standards and bodies, and like I say, even down to lifestyles of being, you know, like you're following someone who has a vast following, but they still have a day job. It's not like they get all their revenue just from social media. I think that makes a huge difference on consumers.
Is there any particular signs that you've noticed that are signs of like distress or even like unhealthy behaviour that are common in women?
What I witnessed on Reddit, particularly, that sort of mean sport, pro-harm, pro-anorexia narrative that we think is banned online but is still very much facilitated. I think getting to a stage where you feel like the best course of action to be motivated to lose weight is to put an image of yourself half naked on a forum and asked to berate me and tell me how terrible I look to make me feel less inclined to eat today is hugely problematic. And it was horrible to witness. To think that is moderated and accepted. I can't imagine the comments that would be deleted on there by moderators and seen as not acceptable, given the fact that entire trend of mean sport and pro-anorexia is still acceptable. It's not necessarily a pressure, but I foresee it as a bit of a pressure. The normalization of cosmetic surgery and being able to kind of go to any beautician or majority of beauty salons and getting filler without lack of regulation on kind of very quick, very short courses to be able to administer things that I believe only NHS accredited staff should be able to administer. And the amount of money that goes into that, I think there's a huge pressure for young people, again, based on the people that they see online, where, you know, influencers, their brand is themselves. So therefore, influencers themselves feel like they have to look a certain way to gain a certain amount of revenue and to get a certain amount of brand deals. But actually what that means is sometimes when they are being open about the types of, you know, interventions or modifications that they're having, that can then lead a person to think, oh, well, if I get Botox from the age of 25, it's going to make my makeup look better and it's going to make my skin smoother and this, that and the other. When actually, again, trying to understand the education behind it, the later impact it can have on your body. I think that's both kind of distressing, and I think it's an unhealthy narrative for us to have.
I know that in many ways, like, social media can have like a positive effect on body image, but like what are some like there's like body positivity, but that can also be negative, but it's more positive than negative. So is there any more examples that you've came across that are more positive than negative?
It mostly comes through the body positivity movement. I think that for me, what is positive though is there has been a shift over recent years with fitness influencers, particularly women, showing different bodies. It's not been a narrative for the majority of the space anyway. It's not been a narrative of being stick thin or weight loss. It's been about building the body. It's been about fueling the body. It's been about, you know, introducing different bodies into the space and recognizing that, you know, I've noticed from the content that I consume and from research that I've done that there's been a shift in influencers not talking about the calories that they do consume now, because it's a case of, okay, this is very individualized, I don't want to negatively impact anyone, so this is obviously what works for me, and directing people to either their online communities or other people's online communities to get educated information. But again, I think that's underpinned by a body positivity movement of being happy with how we look, recognizing that bodies look differently. I think something that I have noticed has fed into that is, rather than it being on social media directly, is the advertisement of different body types on TV. So thinking about all the work that the likes of Dove and Bupa have done in their health campaigns of showing different women's bodies in different ways for both young people and for older generations as well, if this is how our bodies can change. Again, underpinned by the body positivity movement, but I think those type of adverts stick in people's minds of, it's okay for me to look different and not look like people on the television.
Yeah, and I feel like the advertising can be good. Obviously, like Dove and Bupa theirs is really good, but then there's like other ones that are using it just purely for income.
Yeah.
And it is having a bad effect on people.
Yeah, and it's trying to navigate, and you won't always get it right, but it's trying to navigate the intention of, are you actually intending to educate people, or you just, it sounds terrible, but are you trying to tick a box by showing different body types? And I think that you can kind of understand that depending on the type of advert. If it's got kind of like hyperlinks to like their website and different promotions, and you know, if you need more information around this, go to here. I do think that's really important to understand, if we can, the intention behind the advertisement.
That's all from Lauren. Next, we have a psychology lecturer at Northumbria University, Gian Beauvais.
I did my PhD, my master's and my PhD in France. I come from a background in evolutionary biology, to not really social sciences. And after my PhD, but I started working on human behavior and beauty standards during my PhD. And then I moved on to a postdoc position where it was more about social sciences, working with economists, psychologists, and so on. And then I was a lecturer in the US, and then I came and I joined Northumbria University 6 years ago. And since then, I've been, in a psychology department, and continuing working on attractiveness research a little bit, body perception and face perception, basically.
So, as some of your research is on like female beauty standards over history, can you explain some of the things that you have found in your research?
In my research, because coming from an evolutionary background, one of the questions is like, do we have, this kind of adaptive preferences to prefer some kind of facial features or body shapes that have been like selected through time? Or the alternative, there are many alternative hypotheses, but one would be it's just random cultural variation. There is no actually really link with biology and so on. And basically the answer, as often, is a little bit of both. What we find is that beauty standards, they do change. They change between cultures, across cultures, they change through time. However, it seems that some traits, like, they seems to vary like dramatically. Like, it seems that it's really something like just random cultural variation. We don't really know how it can appear, but it's more about what we call cultural evolution, like just following, and I'm not talking about social media, I'm talking also like older trends before mass media, but following the individuals that are more successful, how do they dress, or how their hair, and things like that. So that makes sense. That being said, it seems that for a few traits, not that many, for a few traits, it seems to be a little bit more constraints in what beauty standard can do. And one example will be like for female beauty, or like the attractiveness for women. There is a lot on emphasis, for example, for relatively younger ages. So I'm not talking about like young ages, but like between 20 years old, 30 years old appearance. And that seems to be found in many cultures across time. Like, you look at old paintings, most of the women that are represented at around this age, 20, 25 years old, and they are the ones represented as really beautiful and so on. So some traits like that, they seem to be relatively stable through time and across cultures, but other ones are just very variable.
Do you think that maybe like in today's society, social media does play like a big role in beauty standards and body image?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the main media that people use when they think about appearance, because people don't read magazines that much. They, I mean, they still go to the movies, but less. So yeah, I mean, you will have to also include shows and the thing that people are exposed to. We still have advertisements like in the street, so I don't know how much that would be. But I think yes. So what we call in body perception research is what we call the visual diet. So it's the kind of bodies or appearance of other people you are exposed to during your day, during your life. So it's going to be the people around you. If you're a student and you go on, like some students, maybe they don't go on campus so much, but like being exposed to all your peers and other students, that's a lot of your visual diet. But obviously for the people who are a lot on their phone, that's going to impact their visual diet as well. So yeah, it's visual information. So for the individuals a lot on social media, that's going to enter the visual diet for sure.
Can repeated exposure to like idealized images can actually shape what individuals consider like as normal and healthy in like the looks and like the body as well?
Yeah. So one of the results of the visual diet is there is one very low level mechanism. It's just our brain or cognition. When they get used to a specific, they're going to expose a lot to the same pattern. The brain is going to see that as normal. So then if you see, for example, there are experiments in the lab where you will expose to like the face of a person, but like that is like artificially, let's say, elongated. So you make it a little bit longer, and you do that on like, let's say, 50 faces. You expose this person to these long faces. The next time you're going to show a normal face, the person is going to find it weird because the brain got used to the very long, so it's a very low level visual effect. So we think that indeed, if you're being exposed to, let's say, very thin bodies all day long or like for many hours, then the next time you see a body that is like normal weight, you're going to think it's overweight. You know what I mean? However, we don't really know how long these effects they last. It might be only, in the lab, usually it's like only a few minutes or like half an hour, but then the participants, they go home. We don't really know how long it lasts. So it has an effect. How strong and how durable it is, I'm not sure. And also something, that is kind of lacking in the literature is to have actual experiments like in everyday life. So I don't know if you're very familiar with like the differences between experimental design and correlational designs in research. But yeah, basically correlational design, you just ask some people, are you using social media a lot? And what are your beauty standards preferences, for example? And you can see sometimes that there are correlations. People who are on social media a lot, they prefer like thin bodies. But we don't really know what causes what. So we don't really know if it's being exposed that is going to create this preferences or the opposite, because these people have these preferences, they love being on social media because it's giving them positive feedback or things they like to see.
That's all from Gian. Next, I spoke to Kim from Body Fitness Newcastle to see what she thinks about social media and body image.
We're a fitness space that helps people with their body image. We don't focus on intentional weight loss. We don't focus on before and after photos. We focus on how movement's making us feel, and we tend to find that is what helps people with their body image, rejecting sort of diet culture, rejecting kind of like the very specific beauty standards that have been sort of put to us, and it's all about finding the joy in movement and the joy in being in our here and now bodies, as opposed to always striving for something quote unquote better.
From your experience, how do you think social media has changed the way people perceive their bodies?
Oh yeah, well, it's a massive influence, isn't it? I think we're all on social media, and in some capacity at least, and comparison comes in a lot, whether that be with friends or with people in the public eye. So I find that there is a positive to social media in body image if you are able to find people that are advocates for as I say, rejecting diet culture, and also representation. If you are able to follow people of all different shapes and sizes, ethnicities, genders, you'll realise that actually there isn't just a one size that's deemed as acceptable.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always been around, but social media has just made it worse.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that platforms like TikTok and Instagram have made body image perceptions more common?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's just also, with like marketing has always been sort of traditional, I suppose, especially sort of fitness and beauty marketing has always been about highlighting perceived flaws, highlighting negativities, and then the marketing has been, well, I've got the solution to your quote unquote flaw, and then having that on social media and having sort of targeted ads and having all of that kind of there and thrust upon you, it's definitely made it 10 times worse, because obviously it's a platform first and foremost to make money, and if you've got paid ads, and the way that these places make money is to make you feel bad about yourself in order to buy a product that or invent a what's the saying, invent a problem so they can sell you the solution. And I think it's made body image issues as a result a lot worse, definitely.
Do clients ever mention like comparing themselves to celebrities or influencers, or is the space you have like kind of blocking that out?
I think that people that come here have already done some of the work to reject that mentality, and so therefore finding a space like this kind of fits in with their values. We don't, because basically we have a policy when people sign up that they're not to bring up any language like that might be triggering for other people, because for example, we have a lot of people who are in eating disorder recovery, and talking about that kind of stuff can bring up stuff for other people, and so everyone's really respectful. The only time that we'll ever mention stuff on social media is if you've seen a woman with massive arms and you think that's fit, you think that's gorgeous, and I want big arms, because it rejects the mentality that we're supposed to be as small as possible. So
Yeah.
it's quite a positive thing, what I've heard in my space.
How do unrealistic transformations or edited images affect people starting their fitness journey?
Oh, I mean, massively. I think, the whole sort of before and after mentality in a fitness space, it's kind of like, it's all about suggesting that there's one body that's better than another and that fitness has a look. And it just drives sort of unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy thoughts. And, there isn't any end point. And I think at the moment, especially with the rise of AI, and like before it wasn't just unrealistic, it's now not just unrealistic bodies that we're trying to strive to, it's bodies that don't even exist. They're fake. And yeah, but then also I think that a hell of a lot of people are aware, and I think there's a lot of pushback from it as well. But I suppose it depends what sort of circles you're in and who you speak to. So then it's quite difficult for me to know what other people think, because I don't get those people in my gym. I don't have friends that are like that, so it's difficult to know. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a bit of a bubble.
I think it's better to separate yourself from the people that think that it's like, oh, this is great, because it's just going to affect you in the long run.
Yeah, it's not beneficial, I don't think, in any capacity to think, to sort of compare yourself and to have that kind of mentality that there is such a thing as a better body than, there is this hierarchy and you have to look a certain way in order to be beautiful or to be healthy. It's all made up. It's literally all made up to be able to sell us, sell us more stuff.
What are some common misconceptions that clients may bring from that they maybe got from social media?
I think it's more towards you have a lot of fitness influencers or a lot of fitness people that will say, for a certain move you're doing it wrong, this isn't how you do it, this is how you should do it. And yeah, that might be right for that particular influencer in their body and for maybe the type of people that they teach, but it's also pointing out that, especially here, we have a real diverse range of different bodies and abilities, and actually what one way of doing an exercise might work for one person, that doesn't mean that it's going to work for everyone. So I think it's more stuff like that. It's more like rules that you should do this, and if you don't do it this way, then you're doing it wrong. And all the shoulds of you should work out 3 times a week and it should be intense and you should eat this much protein. And I think that's probably the most common. But also I think that people are generally intelligent enough to know that it's what one person says, and it's most people that especially that come here aren't going to be massively influenced and guided by what one person said on Instagram or TikTok.
What type of content on social media do you think that has a positive impact on people?
Following a diverse range of people. I think people that are questioning why is skinny talk a thing? Why all of a sudden why are bodies trends? But they're not. But at the moment, skinny is in. No doubt in a year or so, curvy is going to be back in, and people that sort of factor in the mental health side of it and aren't very sort of black and white as well. There's nuance in all of this stuff, and knowing that there isn't a one size fits all, knowing that people that just, I suppose, make you think and make you question, and a different range of bodies. So yeah,
I feel like it's just a bit, I'm we shouldn't be idolizing, especially with Hollywood at the minute, they just all look really unhealthy. Yep, let's not idolize this.
No, well, exactly. It's going back to kind of what it was in the 90s. I think it's just, yeah, and no doubt it will return again in 30, 40 years. It's just kind of the way that it is, and it just highlights how messed up it is.
Trends come and go. Body shouldn't be a trend.
No, well, yeah, exactly. Bodies aren't a trend. It's just, and it's always women's bodies. It's not men's. what does that tell you as well?
Yeah. That's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed this episode and this series.